I hope y'all are enjoying your time here in Canada so far. If you're visiting from out of town, I am so sorry. Florida really is the sunshine state. Last 3 days have been no evidence of that whatsoever. But this does remind me of what it used to feel like to live in Cleveland, Ohio. Matter of fact, 2 days ago, Stephanie and I were driving down A1A, and it really looked like it was going to snow here. And we thought, this looks like Cleveland all over again. But we're so glad to have you here with us today. Stephanie and I, we've had a rule ever since we got married, and it's a rule that we made for each other. Neither one of us imposed this rule on the other. We arrived at this together. When we first got married, we said, hey, you know what? Just so we can keep a good handle on our finances, anytime that we want to spend more than $50, we're going to check with each other first. We're going to check with each other. Now, this was, a long time ago, so it'd be like $1,000 in today's dollars probably. But we said if we were going to spend more than $50, we were going to check with each other first. And then in addition, we said we're going to wait a week to see if we still felt like we needed that thing that cost more than $50 if, a week went by and we still felt like we needed it. So this is just one of the few rules that we had kind of kicking things off in marriage so we stay on the same page. Well, fast forward about 13 years, and it was January in Ohio, and some friends of mine and I, Dave Hare and Mike Ferris, we decided we're going to go to the Cleveland Boat Show together. Now, I've been to boat shows here in Jacksonville, and it's fascinating to me. Boat shows here are not a big deal. I guess because you can go out on the boat anytime you want all year round. But in Cleveland, in January, the boat show is a big deal. Like, everybody goes to the boat show because it is the only glimmer of hope that you have in January in Ohio. And so you just go there and you tell yourself, it will be summer again someday, And of course, the ladies weren't worried at all about us going to the boat show. Stephanie certainly wasn't worried. She knew that we couldn't afford a boat, so it wasn't like I was going to come home with a boat. But, and besides, we got to the boat show. Dave is into center consoles. His dream is to have a center console where he can do offshore fishing. I'm a slalom skier, so I'm looking at slalom boats. And Mike's a wakeboarder. And so we're not even interested in the same kind of boat when we got to the Cleveland Boat Show. We were just having a good time there. We had the kids with us and stuff. Until we saw this boat. And it was like, isn't that a beautiful boat? It just called to us. Does it speak to some of you? And all of a sudden, even though that we were all really into power boats and we enjoy going fast in our boats, there was something that just seemed really tranquil about a sailboat. And I don't know what came over us exactly, if it was the sub-zero weather outside, if it was the gray, cloudy skies, or we hadn't seen sunshine for a month, but we began to talk each other into this boat. This is a brand new Hunter 33. It was a beautiful boat. And the guy that was there selling the boat, this is what made it so attractive to us. He wasn't selling the whole boat. He was selling 1/8 of the boat. It was a fractional ownership. And we were like, well, that's kind of reasonable. That makes a lot of sense, right? And then we started thinking, well, what if we split 1/8 of it 3 ways, and then, I'm just buying 1/24 of a boat, right? It's perfectly rational and reasonable. And besides, I wasn't buying a boat. I was investing in my family. You guys with me on this, right? And so never mind the fact that our youngest at the time was 2 years old, which meant that I actually had to fashion a leash that went from the back of his life jacket to the life rail around the edge of the boat so he could kind of walk around the boat. I had to clip him on at different places. And if he fell, we just waterboard him for a little while before we came back. We practiced our man overboard drills a few times. But the ladies were all together at a birthday party for one of the kids. And so after we left the boat show, after we'd shaken hands with this guy and agreed that we were going to buy 1/8 of this boat together, we got in the truck, and now we're driving back, and we realize we have to tell our wives what we've done. And we start thinking like, what's the best way to do this? What is the absolute best way that we can break the news to our wives? And so really maybe you came here today just for this. This is the most important thing you take away from this. And you'll be like, you know what? If the rest of the sermon's bad, I've gotten some really helpful stuff right out of the gate. So guys, here it is. Have witnesses present when you share this kind of information with your wives. The best thing we're going to tell them all together. And so the three of us sat down, and the three wives were like, hey, we've got some news to share. And somehow we convinced them that this was a good idea. And they actually didn't get mad at us. Although Stephanie did have some concerns about the 2-year-old thing. That kept coming up a lot. But so we enjoyed the boat. It was great. It was awesome. But it was definitely not one of our better financial decisions. And we're talking about our money. We're talking about finances. And I just want you to know, I recognize as you walk in here today that you don't want to talk about money at church. And I get that. I get that because I don't think we want to talk about money anywhere. I think that when you come to church, you just want to think happy thoughts and think about nice things. And as soon as somebody brings up money, it's kind of like somebody bringing up politics in the middle of a sporting event. You're like, you know what? I just want to have a couple hours. I just want to escape. I just want to enjoy. And then somebody wants to bring like reality into things. And it's just no fun. But I want to tell you, I think that there are some really helpful and hopeful stuff that we're going to cover today. And we are going to talk today about what it looks like to talk about money in the context of our relationships. And so I hope that provides some help for you. What we've learned, and we'll talk about this more as we go into it, most couples just don't talk about money. That's kind of the prevailing strategy that most couples seem to have adopted is let's just not talk about it. Let's just not address it. And so as much as I recognize it's uncomfortable to talk about money in this context, I really think that there's some helpful stuff that we can learn, and we can face this together, and we can all get better at this. So if you've missed any part of this series so far, you can catch up by going to itspersonal.church. And there we've got the messages from this series as well as kind of an overview of what this series could mean for us as a church and for our community. But we want you to know that we are for you, that we are coming alongside of you, and we really think that there is incredible freedom to be found in these lessons that we have put in front of us by God himself in terms of how we can handle our money. In fact, Jesus talked more about money than he talked about heaven. And I think that's because Jesus knew that money would be a really big deal in our lives. And in fact, our faith becomes real when we talk about what we're doing with our money. And so we've been talking about this idea of following Jesus. And what does it mean? What does it look like to follow Jesus? And here's some thoughts that we've kind of run through the last couple of weeks. The first week we talked about the fact that following Jesus will cost you something. Following Jesus will cost you something. And the real question is, what will it cost you to not follow Jesus? Because to follow Jesus means to surrender. It means to let go. It means to give everything up. And we saw from the story of Peter and those who began to follow Jesus early on, Jesus asked them to give up a lot, to risk their reputation and to risk an awful lot to follow him. And it wasn't until they were willing to take that step that they saw Jesus for who he was. And we learned in that first week that God is revealed when we surrender, even when it doesn't make sense. And so we're holding on to something, but we let go of it. And it's when we let go and we surrender that we actually see God. Some of you would love to see God or experience God in a new way. And it is through surrender that we see God. And then the next week we talked about the question, what do we want people to line up and thank us for in eternity? What is it that we just love to have people thank us for? What does it look like to invest in eternity? And then last week, we kind of centered around this sentence last week, that I will not trust in my riches, but in you, God, who so richly provides. And I challenge you for the next couple of weeks to just say this every day when you're getting started in the day. Put this on your mirror, put this on your dashboard, wherever you're going to see it every day, and just be willing to say out loud, God, I'm not going to trust in my riches, but I'm going to trust in you because you are the one who so richly provides. Now today, we're going to talk about this in the context of marriage and relationships because it can create a tremendous amount of tension in a relationship. In fact, I'm going to refer to a lot of studies that have been done, a lot of data today, but I hope this kind of helps you understand that you are not alone. 97% of marriages say that they have some level of financial tension. And so money can bring about arguments, money can bring about disagreements, money can make us feel like this person that I'm otherwise so completely aligned with, like, man, we just don't have anything in common when it comes to this very important part of our lives. And it can create tension that really kind of ripples out and affects other areas of our relationship. And so real quick, I want to run through some things that will help you, I hope, understand yourself and understand your spouse a little bit better. So we're going to start with understanding ourselves. And this scripture here I thought was an appropriate one to look at as we begin to understand ourselves. And this comes from the book of Lamentations, but this principle is throughout Scripture that we need to look in and examine our hearts and kind of study what we've done and learn and reflect from our lives. And so Lamentations says, let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord. Now, this was written on behalf of an entire nation that had turned away from God, but I think it's very relevant for you and I as well because we drift. Right? We have good intentions, just like Stephanie and I, when we first got married and we said, hey, anything more than $50, we're going to check in with each other on. And then, you fast forward a few years and I'm buying a sailboat. And some of you have done the same thing. I feel safe sharing my sailboat story because I know some of your stories in the room. And some of you have bought cars without checking with your spouse. Some of you have bought houses without your spouse knowing. And so, we can make decisions without our spouse being on board, and it's just a way that we can drift. And so the first thing is to understand ourselves a little bit better. And so I'm going to run through this really quickly, but I'm going to give you some resources that you can follow up with as well. So this first resource, it comes from a book called Why Smart People, and I chose this book for you. Because I thought, as I was getting ready for this message, I was researching this, I thought, who am I speaking to? I'm speaking to really smart people. So I need to find a book that addresses smart people. So this book is Why Smart People Do Stupid Things with Money. And one thing that I thought was really helpful in this book is your money personality. Now, I enjoy this kind of stuff. I love the Enneagram. I love the Right Path profile. I like the Myers-Briggs. I like all these different tools that can help us. StrengthsFinder is a really good one. I like all these tools that can help us really know ourselves better and figure out how we can relate to other people better and perform better, because it starts with knowing ourselves. And so in this book, he kind of lays out this kind of an x-axis and a y-axis. And here, I don't know if you can see this, this is high risk and this is low risk. So some of us are okay with taking risk financially. Some of us are a little bit more cautious financially. Some of us are savers. And some of us are spenders over here, okay? And one of the things that I think is important as we look at any kind of personality typing tool is to recognize that there's not one type that's better than the other. And this might be hard for some of you because you feel like your type is just better. In fact, that's where some of the conflict comes from in marriage, right? When we communicate to our spouse, hey, you're wonderful, right? We say this all the time to our spouse. You are wonderful. Matter of fact, you're the most wonderful person that I could find to spend the rest of my life with. There are so few improvements that need to be made. But let me help. Right? Let me just tweak. I mean, it's not that you're broken. It's not that you're bad. It's just that there's just a little bit of room for improvement. And I'm here to help. I say to Stephanie, I'm here to help and inform. That's my goal, all right? And so before we set out to talk about our spouse, let's think about ourselves a little bit, and let's recognize that the world needs this, okay? The world needs savers. Savers prepare for the future, right? Savers are the ones that keep us from living in a tent down by the river. And then, I was going to say van, but that's become the new cool thing. So, and then the spenders, the world needs spenders too, all right? Can I get an amen from some of the spenders? We get beat up on all the time, right? But we had some good times on that sailboat. I want you to know. And so the spenders are the ones that say, we need to get out, we need to live a little bit, we need to have some fun. And so I love Dave Ramsey's terminology. If you've never done Financial Peace University, he talks about the nerds and the free spirits, and I love that. I love the fact that, those of us that are free spirits over here, we get a little bit of affirmation that way. And there's also some positives and negatives related to the risk factor as well. And so healthy personality types might look like this. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. If this intrigues you, you can go and you can get the book. But healthy personalities look like this. There's entrepreneurs. They're willing to take a little bit more risk. And then there's savers, bon vivant. That's, I had to look that up. But that's actually somebody who says, I'm not spoiled. I just enjoy nice things, right? Have you ever caught yourself saying, I just enjoy nice things? As if it's like, something in your DNA. And then there's nesters. These are people that like to spend money in their home, right? Tend to be savers, but let's carry it. And then there's travelers. People say, hey, let's go out. Let's experience all that the world has to offer. And these are just natural personality types. And they're like all of our personality types. They're based on our experiences and our background. We were all taught certain things about money as children growing up. Some of us were actually taught some negative things about wealth from an early age. And so we have a tendency to sabotage ourselves and get ourselves, because we feel like somehow it's bad to be wealthy or it's a negative thing. And so you avoid that subconsciously. And so anyway, there's these personality types that I think it's healthy for us to be aware of. There's extremes with each of these as well. And so you can kind of go to one of the corners and you could be, a gambler, somebody who's willing to take a lot of risk because they want to win big at some point. If you have a lottery ticket in your pocket right now, and maybe you're in that corner there where you'd say, hey, I'm willing to risk a little bit for some big return. And then you have over here, you have the misers. They're the people who just don't really, they're not about earning a lot or trying to make a lot, but they're going to definitely save what they get, and they're going to maximize that. And so these can kind of become extremes of these personality types. And again, step one is to understand ourselves. And as I think about this in the context of what we talked about last week, last week we had this wall of money here, and we talked about the idea of transferring our trust from this imaginary wall and transferring our trust from money to God, from the gift to the giver, and really putting our trust in him. And as I was thinking about these types here, I thought, do I use money as a wall to protect myself from feeling unlovable or insignificant? Unlovable or insignificant. And I chose those two words because Larry Crabb has said for a long time that the core need of the human being is to feel loved and to feel significant. And if you've done any reading on marriage and stuff, you know that a lot of times we kind of stereotype a little bit and we say that men want to feel significant and women want to feel loved. The reality is a lot of research shows that that's true most of the time, but there's a lot of times where that's flipped. And so you might be a guy and your core need is to feel loved. You might be a woman and your core need is to feel significant. But we're going to talk in a little bit of generalities today in terms of men and women and how we relate to one another. But oftentimes we use money as a wall to protect ourselves from feeling unlovable or feeling insignificant, because we walk around asking these questions all the time. Am I significant and am I loved? And so as we talk about money in the context of relationships today, I want you to try to put yourself in the shoes of your husband or your wife or your partner, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, and think about what they might be experiencing and what they might be feeling specifically with regard to money. That money might say something different to them than it says to you. And some of the conflict or the tension that you feel around money might be because you don't understand well what the other person is feeling. And so Solomon, who we've looked to before, gives us some great advice on this. He's the wealthiest person that ever lived. And then today we're going to look at James, who is the brother of Jesus. And James, the brother of Jesus, he says some really practical stuff in the book of James. And right off the bat, in the first chapter of James, he says this, that everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And I thought that was probably the most appropriate verse for us to keep in mind as we begin to try to understand what is happening with our spouse with regard to money. That if we can just slow down a little bit and really seek to understand before we speak, if we can slow down a little bit and seek to understand before we get angry, we might find that there's some hope for us on the other side of this whole money conversation. Because my goal for you walking out of here today is that you would just begin to have some conversations around money. That my goal isn't to move you in a specific direction. My goal is to say, I want you to be aligned. I want you to be a team. I want you to find some unity as it relates to money in your relationship. And so I came across a great resource this year, and it's Shaunti Feldhahn. She is a fantastic author who's done a tremendous amount of research with regard to what men think and what women think. It's kind of funny how she started, her first book was really just came from like a lot of us driving down the road together, and she asked her husband, what was he thinking? Women, you ever done that? And you're like, what are you thinking? And the husband just literally is like, nothing, right? Like honestly, women, it's just a lot of time, there's nothing going on up there. Like we're driving and we're strategizing because we're watching who's moving in what lane and all that kind of thing, but like there's not a lot going on. Or we're thinking about sex. That's the other thing, right? And women are like, really? And so Shaunti was kind of like, is this really true? Like, are all men like this? And she started to do some research. Are all men like this where they're either thinking about nothing or they're thinking about sex? And she found out, yes, that's exactly the case. And so she wrote this book called For Women Only, which is to help women understand what's going on in their... So I just saved you the whole reading of the book. And then her husband got on board. So the second book, he gets his name on there too. He was like, I'd like to do some research and find out what women are thinking. So this book's about 35 pages. This book is volume 1. It's still being written. But here's kind of what they have found. And they've also done some research on men and women and money, and I've drawn from that. So all the credit goes to them, and the statistics that we're going to hear from today are from these resources. But here's the question that your spouse is asking. Your spouse is asking, do I measure up, and am I lovable? And I'm going to generalize a little bit here with regard to men and women, but typically men are asking the question, do I measure up? Ladies, when he wants that new truck, when he wants that new grill, when he wants that whatever it is, you have to understand that there's something more behind the vehicle or the cooking appliance. There's more to that. He's asking the question, do I measure up? How am I doing with regard to my peers? I've had multiple men say to me that they felt like their salary was a scorecard. And they're asking the question, do I measure up? How am I keeping up in this world? Women are asking the question, am I lovable? Am I worth it? Am I precious? So when a woman gets a new dress or a new pair of shoes, oftentimes what women are asking is, am I still worth the investment that we were dating and you just thought I was the most beautiful thing ever, and I'm still asking that question, am I beautiful? Am I lovable? Am I precious? Am I worth it to you? And so that's just kind of a broad thing to start with here. But here's some really interesting things that I pulled from some of the things I read over the last several months. So first of all, 71% of men are most of the time conscious of pressure to provide for their family. 71% of men responded to a survey and said that most of the time they are conscious of a pressure. It is just an always present pressure to provide for their family. And they're always thinking ahead, and they're always wondering what threats are coming their way. It could be their company is downsizing. It could be, expenses are outpacing income. It could be all kinds of things that they perceive as threats. But men are thinking about the pressure to provide for their family. Meanwhile, 70% of women respond that they would prefer less income and more time together as a family. And both of these speak to the issue of security. Men find security in finances. Women find security in relationships. And again, I know I'm generalizing, but I think that this goes to just really slowing down and seeking to understand the person that we are investing our life with. Here's another interesting difference between men and women. Women are willing to spend money to resolve a worry. And men constantly feel that they're just a few bad decisions away from financial ruin. And so I'll give you an example of this. When one of our children gets hurt or gets sick, Stephanie would like to take them to the emergency room. Have you guys ever gotten a bill from the emergency room? Have you looked at that bill? Now, let me just tell you, it's very delicate to come across as a good dad who loves his children but doesn't want to take them to the emergency room. But after 2 trips to the emergency room, I started working real hard on this script because, $1,600 is just what's left over for us to pay, right? To find out that they have a fever and, anyway. So this is just, I could go on and on. But this is the first thing when I read this, I was like, I wrote in the margin of the book, I'm like, yep, the emergency room. Like, this is it, right? Women are willing to spend money to resolve a worry. Women often describe the way that they think as kind of like a computer screen with a lot of windows open, whereas men describe the way that they think as a computer screen that's turned off. But no, men kind of think about one thing at a time, and women think about a lot of things. And part of what comes with that multitasking that women do mentally is that they are looking for ways to kind of close these individual windows. And each time they close a window, they feel like, okay, I've just reduced my mental load. I've just reduced my mental stress a little bit. And if spending money is a way to resolve a worry or to close one of those windows, then they're often willing to spend money to close one of those windows. Men feel like when they spend money or they see money being spent, then it like opens a window for them. And they feel like then that's the window that they have to focus on. So just a little thing to be aware of. Another thing that's an interesting difference is 70% of men need to think things through before talking them through. And then this statistic really fascinated me. Nothing else in this survey was this high. 98% of women would prefer to process through dialogue. Now, this is really important when it comes to money because we often think, as women, we might go into a conversation and we're like ready, you don't really know where you're going and you don't know where this is all, but see, you got to remember that men hear it through a filter of she knows where she's going, she's got an agenda, she's got someplace she wants to land on this, because men, most of the time, by the time they start a conversation, they kind of know where they want to go with it. But women are just sort of like, let's talk about it. And men are like, whoa, I need some time to think about it first and then to be able to talk about it. And so 98% of women want to process it, want to think about it out loud, want to resolve the problem as they go. Men need a little bit of time. So when when there's a problem that comes up financially and your husband withdraws and kind of goes into his cave, I've heard women describe it that way. It's like he just withdraws and goes into his cave. It doesn't necessarily mean he's running away from the problem. It just means he needs a little bit of time for that to kind of, marinate is the word that I use in our family a lot. Like I just kind of need to marinate on that a little bit. I need to think about that for a little while. And sometimes it's just sort of running in the background before the man's ready to come up and talk about it. Now, here's what's really disappointing about you ladies. 60% of you, you just want us to listen. You say this, you say, I just want you to listen. And ladies, here's where you're really missing the genius to which you have, hitched your wagon. 95% of you say that our solutions, not that helpful. Now, I don't even know how that could be possible, that you'd be missing out on the brilliance that lives right under the same roof that you do. But there's this tension. So women really want us to listen. Guys, it's important for us to know this. And it's important for us to know that the solutions we offer, as brilliant as they may be, often fall on deaf ears. And so it's really important to just listen and to process. Now, men, on the flip side of this, 79% of men say that they enjoy emotionally investing in a dream. What does that mean? What's that look like? Well, that's when your husband says something like, I think it would be really awesome if we were to just like open our own business and do this, okay? That's like kind of mental recreation for guys. Men enjoy emotionally investing in a dream. And that is a great time for you ladies to just say, wow, right? Wow, not how. Not how. Don't step in with how. How like steps all over the dream. How squashes everything. How's no fun. Nobody invites how to a party, okay? Wow is all your husband needs to hear. And ladies, here's why this is completely safe. I know why you don't say wow. You don't say wow because you're afraid to encourage him. You're afraid if he gets just a little bit of encouragement, the next thing you know, he's selling the house, you're living in a van, like he's pursuing this thing 110%. You have to understand, this is today's dream, okay? Tomorrow, whole nother story. Be a whole nother thing. You just say, wow. And then a few days later, he's forgotten about it, he's moved on to something else. This is just a way that men kind of like relax their mind a little bit. Okay, so how do we fill each other's tanks? This is how we fill each other's tanks. 77% of women want to feel beautiful. They want to feel worth it. Men, this is really important to remember and to understand. And meanwhile, 98% of men want to be thanked, appreciated, and needed. And so this kind of pops up different ways for different guys. But men want to be recognized for the significant contribution that they're making to your world. And ladies, this is the thing. This is why financial conversations bring tension for us sometimes. Men they want so badly to be your knight in shining armor. They want to be your hero. And when conversations come up about finances and we begin to feel inadequate as a man, either because we don't earn enough or because we're not able to do enough to make you feel special and cherished, like that's a real hard thing for us as men. And that can elevate the conversation sometimes if we don't really understand what's going on in the background. And meanwhile, women really want to feel cherished and special and honored. And guys, we have to look for ways that we can do that with our women, regardless of what's going on financially. Look for creative ways to do that. All right, so we're going to keep talking about filling the tank. 82% of women feel insecure in his love or the relationship. 82% of women say that they at least experience seasons where they feel insecure in his love or in the relationship. And 74% of men, this is fascinating to me, 74% of men responded that they would rather be unloved and alone than to feel inadequate and disrespected. Wow. There's a lot of emotion that is behind these money conversations. And the reason I wanted to take a day and talk about this in church in the midst of all this is because I feel the tension on your behalf. I have sat with you, I've talked with so many of you. I know that money is not an easy topic. And so I don't ever want you to walk into church and feel like, oh man, we're talking about money again. I want you to know that Jesus wants to help you. The reason he talks about money so often is because he wants to help you. God wants to help you. And I think that there is hope and there is possibility in our relationships if we can begin to talk about these things in healthy ways. And so real quick, I want to talk about some things that have helped us. So this is important to know when the conversation comes up, when either party in your relationship says, let's talk, right? Oh man, let's talk. They're just like, those two words can just bring up so many emotions right off the bat. Someone's going to feel inadequate and someone's going to feel scolded. Someone's going to feel inadequate and someone is going to feel scolded. Now, that's the way it can start, but you can rewire your relationship and you can change the association. So this does not have to be the immediate response that you feel. I learned in our relationship that because Stephanie and I are pretty well aligned on this topic, really, but I'm kind of the nerd. I like to do the spreadsheets and I like to really work on things and stuff. And I learned that I was just getting way too in the weeds, like all the way down to the penny on all the expenses and stuff. And I would have these spreadsheets and I would come to her. And really what I was looking for, women, if you can understand your men a little bit better, what I was really looking for was an attaboy. I don't think I could have articulated at the time, But what I really wanted was for Stephanie to just be like, wow, you do amazing spreadsheets. Look at these graphs. Look at, like, wow, you're just great. Like, that's really what I wanted from her. But what did she feel? She felt like, because what drives a nerd nuts is when there's like $5.63 receipt from Target that's missing. Who am I kidding? $5.63 at Target. $563 at Target. And when there's that one receipt that's missing, it kind of drives a nerd a little bit crazy. And so I would come to her and be like, hey, like, what happened at Target, And what did she feel? She immediately felt scolded. She immediately felt like she was on the defensive. And so we learned some really helpful things from Dave Ramsey. But one of them is just this: start the conversation. Like, y'all need to have some conversations and figure out safe ways to do it. But really helpful for us, Dave Ramsey taught us a thing. He said, set a timer for 13 minutes. Set a timer for 13 minutes. And so we started having once a week money conversations where we literally would set a timer for 13 minutes. And that helped Stephanie so much because she felt like, okay, like, I can survive anything for 13 minutes, right? And, if I'm getting called on the carpet for Target or whatever, like, it's just 13 minutes. And it really helped me as well because I knew that if I only had 13 minutes, I couldn't get into the weeds. It couldn't be like all the little details. I had to kind of come in with the big picture, okay? Here's what our net worth was last month. Here's what our net worth is this month. Good job. Keep doing it, right? And so you find out that we're just going to stick to high things. So start the conversation. Clarify the language. Make sure that you know exactly what you're talking about. Like, know when a win is a win for you. Know what it looks like for you to be aligned. We talked a couple weeks ago about what do you want people to line up and thank you for in eternity. You should be aligned on the big purpose and vision for finances in your marriage. We found, this is really interesting language in our marriage. We used to, after church, I'd say, let's go out for lunch, right? Let's go out and I like to go to a restaurant where, sit down and just relax a little bit, enjoy a meal. And Stephanie would ask, can we afford that? And I would think, of course we can afford that. Like, we both went to graduate school. We could afford going out to lunch after church, It was years, guys, I'm being so transparent this morning. It was years before I realized what she actually meant when she asked the question, can we afford that? She meant, do we have the money for that? I was hearing, are we the kind of people who can go out to lunch after church? I was like, yeah, we're the kind of people that can go out to lunch after church. Oh, do we actually have the money? No, we don't have the money. Right? I know I'm not alone. I've had the conversation with some of you, like, that is a completely different conversation. Like, yeah, we can afford that. Oh, do we have the money? No, we don't have the money. So this is important. Clarify the language. The other thing is share the responsibility. Share the responsibility. Men, get in there. A lot of times I hear stories where the wife is handling all the finances, and with handling all the finances comes handling all the stress. And we're not wired to handle this alone. So we need to share the responsibility. We need to both be involved. We need to both know what's going on. Because what happens is that if you're the one that's carrying this burden alone, you begin to feel all of the stress and all the anxiety. And this is why a $5.63 thing at Target becomes a big deal, because there's so much more that you're aware of because you're aware of the whole financial picture. You've got to share the responsibility. And then go on a money date. Doesn't that sound like fun? Go on a money date. But seriously, you should carve out a little bit of time once in a while. It could be every quarter. It could be once every 6 months. But carve out some time where you say, we're just going to go out and we're going to talk a little bit about our financial goals. Are we, you guys, you chose to spend the rest of your lives together because you are aligned on so much. And you can accomplish so much as a couple if you will just come together and clarify, what are your goals? What do you want to accomplish in this life? What do you want people to line up and thank you for in eternity? And then finally, it may come to this. It may be that you need to get counseling. And that is something that you should not be afraid of or ashamed of. In fact, Stephanie and I, we went away overnight for our anniversary on Friday night, and we were walking around downtown St. Augustine. We're walking down this one little street, and she's like, oh, we've never walked down this street in St. Augustine before. And just at that moment, I was like, oh, no, we did. This is where we came for our first marriage counseling appointment, right here in that building. She's like, oh, yeah. Stephanie and I should have gone from our honeymoon straight to the marriage counselor, and we didn't. We waited 17 years before we went to marriage counseling. And part of that was because we were afraid that people might find out that we went to marriage counseling. And as soon as we went to marriage counseling for the very first time, we walked out of that office and we stood in that parking lot and said, we need to tell everyone that we know that we are going to marriage counseling. We've gone to marriage counseling several times through the course of our marriage, usually for 4 to 6 weeks at a time. But we need that, and we should have started doing that sooner. And you might need that around this topic. It might be just a symptom of helping you understand how to know each other better and more deeply. So look for the help that you need. Guys, we are for you. I hope you feel that. I hope you sense that in this church. We are not asking for anything from you. We feel like there are opportunities to invest here. And if you show up every Sunday, and if your kids love being here every Sunday, then why wouldn't you want to invest here? But we are not asking something from you. We want so much for you. And I want you to have healthy conversations at home around this topic of money. So I'd love to share one story with you from a couple here in our church who had to kind of figure out how to bring their money stories together and then embrace a simple strategy for really surrendering their finances to God.
Hi, I'm Daniel Graham.
And I'm Jennifer Graham, and we have 4 children, Madison, Adam, Noah, and Jesse.
We moved to Nocatee a little over a year ago, and we've been attending Access Church since we moved here.
My previous approach to finances was, I'd make money and then spend money.
I was pretty much the same way, paycheck to paycheck, and what came in was either already spent before I put it in the bank account or it went out as soon as it got there. So it was never really a thought of budgeting, or we had bills and we paid them and we created more bills.
I mean, for me, I always thought, wow, I have a good job. And this was back years ago when I was single, and I made good money. I didn't have anybody to spend it on or any kids, but yet I still felt like there was times where I was running out of money.
I spent more than I made. So I accumulated debt and credit cards, toys, things that really were more important to me at that time than anything else. There should have been something that was pulling at my heart, or something that was I could have done differently that might have been more meaningful at the time.
There was just sort of that tension of frustration, and then knowing that God was calling me to do more, but then trying to figure out how I was going to do it, living in debt and not budgeting correctly.
From a personal level or an internal level, there was always something pulling me that I needed to do more, that I needed to do something for other people. But at that time in my life, church wasn't a priority by any means. Tithing certainly wasn't a priority.
10 years ago, sitting in church, listening to Andy Stanley do a series on giving, saving, and living on the rest, and the financial peace that came with that, and hearing that God did not want my money, but he wanted something for me and more for me, and that one of those things was financial peace and getting out of debt.
When I met Jennifer and saw that she had a plan at that time, and it kind of opened my eyes to the direction that I wanted to go financially, as well as spiritually, but it all kind of came together when we got together.
I was debt-free, and then Daniel and I met, and he did have debt, but together we decided that we wanted the same thing for our marriage. And so that was a commitment that we made in the very beginning, that we are going to be financially, we're not going to live in debt, and that we're also going to be percentage givers. It's been difficult. There's
been plenty of arguments on financial, especially early on. I didn't start this journey until 6 years ago when I met Jennifer, as far as even thinking along the lines of giving, especially not a percentage, that would have never even entered my mind. When I saw how much investment went to our kids through Access Church, through some other strategic partners with North Point Ministries that we've been involved with over the years. And that was really my aha moment that I know we're doing the right thing.
So we got the jars for Madison and Adam when they were little, and we put on the jars, give, save, and then have fun on the rest, so that at an early age, they are learning and implementing what we're hoping that they'll do later on. What took us for a long time in life to do.
A lot of trials and
A
tribulations.
lot of trials and tribulations. We're hoping that by modeling that and showing them that they will have financial security and peace earlier in life and not have some of the things that we dealt with.
It's just so nice to be here at Access Church and be able to see where the dollars are going and the investment that our church is making, selfishly in our kids, which we love, but in your kids and the community, St. Johns County. You can physically see where your investment's going. And that's big for me because I not only is it hard to relinquish your finances to Christ, but it's harder when you don't see where it's going. And that's what I love about where we're at now, and we get to see and be a part of it, and hopefully make somebody's future brighter, as well as continue to invest in our own children.
It's a simple strategy to give first, save second, and live on the rest. And it is probably the single best tool for aligning yourself in marriage on the big goals, the things that really matter. Start with the biggest rock. Give first, save second, live on the rest. Stephanie and I, as the Sailboat illustrates, have had different seasons where we have made less than ideal decisions related to how to spend our money, but we have never had any disagreement on giving first and saving second. And so we have conversations around the spending piece. But for us, those big rocks are immovable. They are in place, that we're going to give first, save second. And then that gives you a little bit more freedom around how you enjoy the rest or live on the rest. We are in the middle of this campaign called It's Personal. And next Sunday, we're going to ask you to bring a card filled out. If you don't have one of these cards yet, then we'll hand these out to you on your way out today. But we would love for you to consider what it would look like for you to take a step in your financial journey with us. And I say you take a step in your journey, and I say with us, because this is something that's very personal for you. We understand that. And we think that surrendering your finances to God is just a way that you grow closer in your relationship with Him, that your trust and your faith grows when you surrender your finances. Jesus talked about that. He was convinced that the number one competitor for our hearts was our money, our stuff. And so by surrendering our finances to Him, we invite Him into our finances. If you want God to help you with your financial situation, the best way to invite Him in is to give first, save second, live on the rest. Now, I've said before, if we seem shady, if I seem shady, you don't want to give to Access Church, then give somewhere. You should be generous, okay? Give somewhere. But if you're here every Sunday and you're trusting us with your children and you're trusting us with your spiritual development, why in the world would you not trust this church with your finances? So consider how you can help this church to reach our community and to reach the world and to reach your kids and my kids as we inspire them to believe that God is for them and wants the very best for them. So this is next week. We will go through the exercise of all turning this in next week and then seeing what might be possible. Seeing what God might do through us as a church in this community, in this church, and in Costa Rica because of your generosity. Listen, you don't want your love story to be strangled by debt or to be drowned out by fights and arguments around finances that are unnecessary. It is possible for you to begin to have healthy conversations around money. It is possible for you to live with purpose as it comes to your finances, and to see that through what God has given you, through all that he has blessed you with, you are able to make a significant difference in the lives of others. And we would love for you to join us on this. Let me pray. God, thank you so much for all that you've given us. Help us to not put our trust in riches, but in you, who so richly provides. We ask, God, that you would help us to trust you in this area, that you would help us to take steps to surrender to you. And God, I ask that you'd help us to be slow to speak and slow to anger, and help us to be quick to listen to one another. Amen.